Hey guys, welcome to my TLDR update notes for Vainglory. This is 2.3, massive update, loads of different things going on here. So I wanted to take the time to explain some of it. Now, I know I haven't released a video in over a week. I've actually been moving house. I have just managed to purchase a house and I am moving into it over the course of the next few weeks. So again, I might be a little bit here and there depending on where I'm going to be. So I'm sorry about that, but I will get to it very, very soon. Back to the normal schedule. I just didn't realise I was going to get the house so quickly. I actually got the offer accepted last week, and everything's been moving really quickly, just because there's no chain with me and no chain with them. So, you know, I'm going to have my own place. I'm going to have a new big studio. I'm going to be able to do better streaming and also potentially do better videos as well. But again, it's just the moving process is taking a while. So thank you everybody for being so patient. I'm working on a big video called How to Team Fight. And I'm going to be looking at it from the carry perspective, the captain perspective, and obviously the jungler perspective, which kind of rolls into the carry as well. So I'm working on that and hopefully going to release it tomorrow. So I've got that coming. Now, without further ado, let's have a look at the update notes. Now, I'm not going to look at all the skins, even though this Gwen skin is awesome, as you can see here. And I'm not really that bothered about looking at the Elite Four skins. They also look great too. Obviously, this is not really my area of expertise. You guys can make your own minds up whether you like these things. This is very, very personal taste, you would have to say. But let's have a look down the line. Charms are an interesting thing. Obviously, you get the access to the taunts, the dances, and all that kind of stuff. And this is just I think SEMC are planning to do it on a limited basis right now to see how it does. And then if it, becomes popular or people like it, although it needs some changes, they might introduce it in sort of a full-time thing in the future for your favorite hero, I guess, anyway. And you've got these passes as well, which gives you, a boosts for everything, especially the players that need the glory to get new heroes and such and so on. This is a really good idea, I think. But let's go past all of this, because the UI update is awesome. I love the fact that they are potentially introducing talents. It's going to add a load of depth to Vainglory, a little bit like League of Legends, where you can use your own talent trees for heroes. I think that's going to be really cool. Vainglory have definitely got it right. SEMC have definitely got it right. The way that the game is going is something that I'm really interested in, and I really like that they're keeping the lore in as well. I don't know about you guys, but I do sometimes like reading about my favorite hero, and with all the different skins having different lores, I do love the time that Vainglory puts into this. It's very unique. Match history coming up now. I will talk a little bit about this because I think this is really important. A match history for you guys, it should be something that you're looking at and looking at how you're doing over the course of, say, 30 games, seeing where you're going wrong, seeing which heroes are working best for you, which role you're performing best in, and I think this is a really good way of doing it. However, as you can see, because they are using an API, and let's have a look at it here, so it will link directly to your third party on API integrated sites. That's the important part. Vainglory are not planning, as it stands, I think, to do their own match history. Now, if the API sites aren't good enough and they don't provide the correct experience for the player, I think SEMC might consider doing their own match history page. But what it is doing, I'm hoping, is that you click the link and it comes up with a very mobile-friendly integrated match history that would be very similar to what you would get from the Vainglory app itself. So I think for the moment they are sticking with the API sites, because what they've done, guys, is they have given these API tools over to developers, and if then they came and said, I'm going to do my own match history, well then actually why would you bother going to a third-person API site apart from those extra stats that you could potentially get from the website or from that mobile site that you go to? So, and Vainglory could very easily turn around and say, well, we can integrate all of that into our app, but then what's the point in giving the API tools over in the first place? I think you can see it with League. League have done a very rudimentary match history, and I think that's something that you could put in to Vainglory, because I would like to see a rudimentary match history, and then if you want to delve into the further stats, you use these API sites. And I do like that the app, because this is so great, obviously being on mobile, you do get that direct link from the client to these API sites. So this will be something that I think you guys should keep your eyes on, especially for those of you that want to monitor your own performance. Really interesting. Practice mode, I think this is going to be really interesting. You can do multiplayer practice modes where you can practice against each other. You can practice against your friends. That's really, really important. You guys can now just be able to play against each other, practice stutter stepping, practice lane matchups. This is a really important part for those of you that want to improve as a player. I definitely think you guys should pay attention to this. And again, 30,000 gold, no more pots of gold. You can get the experience that you want. You can practice stutter stepping against the Kraken. It's one of the best ways to learn to stutter step, because if you can buy items and solo Kraken as a weapon power carry, really easy to learn to stutter step on that. But I think that's a really, really cool system, and I think the new practice mode is going to be really good for you guys that want to play and have friends that you can play against and learn things and learn hero matchups and improve as a unit as well. Especially if you've got a team and you want to play against someone else in your team just to improve, this is a really good way to do that. Player frustration, this is interesting. Phone vibrate on match found. I actually use an iPad, so this is not going to affect me too much, but those of you that play on phone, if that's a good thing, let me know. I'm not sure. I'm guessing sometimes you might forget that you've queued up for a match and you might end up dodging, so that's good. Surrender votes. 2 out of 3 after it's passed. Look, this is interesting for me because you could sometimes have a player who's playing a Baron, for instance, who really wants to get to the late game, and you have 2 members on the team that keep surrendering, and eventually it surrenders if you failed 3 times. There is opportunity for abusing this. I think it is low and limited opportunity, and it might actually help more than it stops, but you have to be aware that this isn't always necessarily a good thing. Because, again, if you're playing and there's a duo that's griefing you, they could actually force the surrender after a little while. So I think that there might need to be adjustments here, that if a duo is playing, that kind of power shouldn't be given to the duo. Or it should be applicable for team, not for team matches either, because obviously that would be, you should all be on the same boat when you're playing in a full team match. But just for solo queue, I think this should be important. Just for solo queue can be important. But if you're playing with a duo or you're playing in a full team matches, I don't think this should be the way that it is. But we'll see how it works out over this patch. I'm sure the feedback from you guys in the community will be really, really good. And this is especially something that I'm very much kind of in accordance with. Now, I did talk about dodging in my how to gain elo video. So now, again, I did say you shouldn't do it too often. I definitely think dodging is still a tactic that you can use. Even though SEM say do not accept dodging as a tactic, I do think that, unfortunately, there are situations in solo queue where your team composition is being trolled, or you're just not having a good team composition. I still think dodging is fine. I know I disagree with SEMC here. I shouldn't disagree with SEMC, but there are situations where, unfortunately, you're going to be put in a situation where you could end up just losing the game when you go in anyway. So I think this is an awkward one. I definitely think if you dodge continuously, the penalty should be larger. But I don't think if you dodge once a day, for instance, if you dodge once a day, just you as a player, I don't think that the penalty should be high. I haven't actually checked what the penalty is yet, so if you guys let me know, that would be interesting. If it's just one dodge, it's not too bad, especially if people have like issues with their internet as well and they end up dodging. So one dodge or 2 dodges, the penalty I think should be similar. Any more than that in a day, I definitely think that the ranked on dodge penalty should go up. But I just think one dodge, if you're getting punished heavily for just one dodge, I'm a little bit concerned about what kind of message that's sending, because it definitely gives more power to trolls or people who want to grief you in the hero select, and I definitely don't think that's a good thing. Notification, yeah. That's, again, sometimes people have had late night spams, and that's interesting. Now, here we go, gameplay changes. This is where my expertise comes in. None of my opinions. Back to normal Excoundrel. I do like this manual item builds. I do like the fact that you can also create item builds for your heroes before you go into the match. Yeah, I like this. Really, really good here. Obviously, allows you to have different sets of items depending on the kind of compositions that you're playing into. I definitely think that's really really important. This is definitely a big quality of life change. Look at this. You go into the shop, you can swap your items. Now you won't click your boots instead of clicking your fountain. If you're always used to clicking fountain on the left, yeah, really, really important, and I think that's really cool, a really good move from SCMC, just to provide a little bit of quality of life, especially for captains. And that's good. You'll see how much total gold the player is worth. This is really important. Death streaks. Now, if you're continuously dying, now the enemy team won't get that big gold bounty every time they kill you. It will stop enemy snowballing. Actually, snowballing won't be as important, I think, just because... especially not kill snowballing. You can still snowball off global objectives like turrets and Kraken or, Goldmine. But this means you can't snowball off one poor player in lane. For instance, you've got a really bad laner who goes like 0-8. Now they won't be as worth as much to the enemy team. And I really like that. It also gives you more chance for comeback as well. I definitely think it actually makes late game compositions in solo queue a little bit more effective. Because now you can't get as punished early. I do think there will be chances for you to unfortunately lose the game due to a snowball from the early game, but no longer will you have a player who's trying to play a late game who keeps getting killed over and over again and the enemy is just snowballing out of control. There'll be a limit to that snowball, and there'll be a limit to the resources that the enemy team or you can work with, so that's interesting. Blitz balance, I'm not too interested in Blitz. Let's go down to the attack speed changes. This is an interesting one because the consensus is it's actually made attack speed slightly worse, but you shouldn't notice too much of a difference in the late game. So let's just go through it in sort of a slower detail here. We've simplified a lot of the bonus attack speeds on our items. These changes are all made possible by removing a long-standing 0.1 second delay that was being added to each attack. Attack speed will now be more dramatically increased as a hero attacks, and therefore some abilities and items needed to be modified. So what you should see now, guys, is you will actually have a higher base attack speed from the start. So you'll actually see a more crisp, clean animation between your attack speeds. But what you're actually going to see is everybody gets a big nerf, as all of the items get a big nerf in terms of the percentage attack speed that they're providing. Now, these numbers are never going to line up exactly to what they were previously. So I will have to do some tests about the actual damage output that this attack speed had. But from talking to some pros, they did say that they felt that it could be worse. Now, we'll have to see as this patch goes on, or over this update. So, during the next few weeks, I will do a video about attack speed and how it's actually changed. But realistically, you shouldn't see, especially for the average player, you shouldn't see too much difference. Also, stutter stepping should technically be slightly easier, so you should now be able to stutter step slightly easier. But like as you can see, you're getting big attack speed nerfs. Ringo, big attack speed nerfs there. Obviously, Fortress as well. And all of the items. Poison Shiv actually not having a huge attack speed nerf. And that's interesting because you look at the rest of the items here, and actually, Poison Shiv receives the least hit. And actually, items in general have received different hits depending on how powerful they are. Look at this, though. 5% on Poison Shiv. It's actually a small nerf to the item given its standing compared to... a small buff to the item given its standing compared to everything else. This actually means that you should get more bang for your buck from Poison Shiv. And now you have to look at the item specifically. So, Sword Spin Up, he's still going to be attacking fairly quickly at the max level. So let's have a look at the item, specifically. Alternating Current basically got cut in half. And that's kind of in line with what you're seeing here. Everybody's kind of getting cut in half, except for Ringo at max level. He scales a bit better. So that got cut in half. Blazing Salvo is down. Bone Saw is down by half. Breaking Point is down by almost half. Swift Shooter down by half. Tornado Trigger down by almost half. And Weapon Infusion is down almost half. More like sort of 33%. But Poison Shiv is down 5%. That's actually a fairly indirect buff given the standings of attack speed here. So that's something that I think you guys should keep your eyes on. Definitely think Poison Shiv, especially with the into heal compositions, is way more viable, especially given the item changes that we're going to have a look at now. Now, this is where we like to talk about things in depth. Let's have a look at Bonesaw specifically. Armor Pierce up flat to 8% and Armor Shred down per stack. But realistically, this keeps it exactly the same. If you think about the fact that 6% times 8 is 48, then 5% times 8 is 40. So then you actually just get 1 stack for free right at the start of buying Bonesaw. How valuable that will be remains to be seen. It definitely makes Bonesaw, I guess, slightly more impactful as soon as you buy it. But realistically, I don't know how much of a big change that's going to be. It really depends on how the attack speed works out. I still think Bonesaw will be a unique item specifically if you want to run a double weapon power composition, or if your enemy is got a lot of armor and you desperately need to try and shred through it. This is a big change. Huge change, actually. So now you can only get 20 stacks of breaking point, and you actually lose 3 per second. So you get towards the high stacks quickly, and realistically, once you're above like 10 stacks, you're actually starting to do some serious damage. So I think breaking point is still a good go-to second item, but it had a big attack speed nerf. If you remember here, it had a fairly big attack speed nerf. It really depends on how that works out in terms of the overall sort of scheme of things. But you have to be able to maintain your stacks in a team fight, otherwise you're actually going to get punished for them more heavily. So there are less stacks and you lose more per second. So it's really good if you're able to maintain stacks continuously. So it will reward the players that can stutter step correctly, can continuously basic attack, can land weapon power damage over and over again. But now it's going to punish you if you actually, unfortunately, don't attack for a little while, or you get out of combat, and you're going to lose more stacks, and there are less stacks to lose as well. So it's definitely going to be an item that needs more precision, and I don't know if there... At the moment, I don't think there's many alternatives to Breaking Point. If you're not going to go Bonesaw, or you're not going to go Tornado Trigger, or you're not going to go Poison Shiv, then Breaking Point is the better one to go for an elongated fight. That kind of just stands out as it is. If you're planning on playing a fight that isn't about burst, is about kiting and trying to get towards a later stage of a team fight, Breaking Point is still going to be the go-to item. But I do think that we'll see how that transpires. There has been some changes to Critical Strike, so we'll talk about that as we go on. Crystal Infusion, you got a big boon in terms of cooldown speed, especially when you got sort of level 9 infusions, and you saw a lot of pro players do. But again, you're not going to lose the other aspects of the Crystal Infusion. I still think it's worth getting it. You still get a huge damage boost to your teamfight potential. It's definitely worth it in the late game. I still think we'll see pro players build it early on as well, depending on how they want to fight. I've always said in solo queue, you shouldn't focus on building infusions early unless your team is or you're playing with a team, or you're confident you can force a fight. Because the problem is that pros who build it at level 9 or whatever, they know exactly how they're going to force a fight. They know they're going to get the maximum use out of building an infusion that early. The problem in solo queue is sometimes you can build an infusion at level 9, level 10, and end up not fighting for the entire duration, so you've just wasted 500 gold. But it is worth sometimes buying it and then using it as you fight. So if you have a space in your inventory, it depends if you have space. But again, not a huge change, pretty significant, but still think obviously Crystal Infusion will be played early on by pros, and obviously still very important for you guys building it in the late game if you're playing a CP carry. Critical strike damage from Lucky Strike has gone up, so you'll get a small boost from building this, the tier 2 critical strike item. I don't necessarily think it needed a buff, to be honest, but it's got one, so you'll feel that, especially on the likes of Vox and Ringo, they'll have, I guess, a little bit more damage. 3% is, in the grand scheme of things, works out to be a fair amount, but it's not huge. This is an interesting change. Armor Pierce, the flat Armor Pierce that Tension Bow provides is up to 12% from 10. I could do some maths on this, but I'd need to probably do that in a separate video, but if you think about it, that is fairly significant. Say you have 100 armor, instead of piercing 10, you're now piercing 12, which may not seem a great amount, but when you look at the exponential curve of what armor does in terms of damage protection, especially if you're in that middle area, 2% can actually be quite a lot. I don't know how much it's actually going to help Tension Bow scale into the late game. I guess what it is saying is that if you buy it, you can get to the late game more easily. It's a little bit more impactful early, so you can make that smooth scale. But I definitely still think Tension Bow will remain a very early game item. And this will just help you be a little bit more impactful with it. Whether we see the likes of Glaive and even Gwen again, although Gwen does go Tension Bow anyway, this might just make that build more attractive, especially with the changes to the attack speed. So you might see some weapon power carries like Taka, Glaive, Gwen pick up Tension Bow more frequently. Lance especially might end up picking this up even if he's playing Captain, but yeah, definitely makes the likes of Lance more powerful. Gwen, Taka, Glaive, they'll all benefit a little bit from that 2%. So let's have a look at Tornado Trigger. This is actually interesting. There's a pretty decent 200 gold combine cost, but you get 15% critical strike chance. I would pay 200 gold for 15% critical strike chance any day of the week. I don't know about you guys, but it says increase in cost with a substantial amount of power. They are not kidding. This is a huge item to pick up now. And actually with the changes to Breaking Point, this might just be the go-to second weapon power item for most weapon power carries, including Vox, believe it or not. I mean, I still think Vox, given his kit, will benefit more from a Breaking Point, but the likes of Ringo, I mean, I'm looking at this saying, damn, dude, with the changes to Bonesaw and the changes to Tornado Trigger, you could go a build of Sorrow Blade, Tornado Trigger, Tyrant's Monocle, and Bonesaw and be destructive. You could even go Tornado Trigger into Bonesaw, but you get a lot of attack speed from that. But again, you know, this is huge. And what it does do is it compensates a little bit for the Tyrant's Monocle build. So the critical strike chance is down 15% and the critical strike damage is down 5%. So actually Tyrant's Monocle is an interesting one because the weapon power has gone up, but obviously the critical strike chance and the critical strike damage has gone down. So it will make it a little bit more effective when not critical striking. And obviously you will still get an increased damage from critical strike because it works off your weapon power. So you get a 10 increase in weapon power. And the critical strike damage here is probably compensating that. But I think it's a slight net nerf because you'll get slightly lower crits. And obviously you'll crit less often. But sorry, it's a what is it talking about? That's a 5% down. So what you'll see here is that instead of you getting 8 out of 10 times crit, you're going to get 7 out of 10 times crit if you build double Tyrant's Monocle. However, you combine that with this, so you've got the critical strike chance up to 35%. If you now go Sorrow Blade, Tornado Trigger, double Tyrant's Monocle, or even if you just go Tornado Trigger, double Tyrant's Monocle, because that's still 120 weapon power. I still don't think it's good enough. I still think you have a low weapon power here. But if you go Sorrow Blade, Tornado Trigger, Tyrant's Monocle, you're now going to be hitting basically 105% critical strike. That'll get you a guaranteed almost 100% critical strike with wasting very little stats. I think it's going to be interesting. I definitely think this into double this with a Sorrow Blade will be a good build for those super aggressive carries. The problem is that you can never go Tornado Trigger first, and I still think that this is going to be too low weapon power to combine with Tornado Trigger. 120 with Tornado Trigger probably just isn't enough. But it definitely reduces the power of the Breaking Point double Tyrant's Monocle build. You can actually stack slightly quicker, so you'll actually get more sustained damage and you'll get more non-critical strike damage. But the Vox huge crits that you see coming out won't be as effective. But it's definitely more sustainable if you're not critical striking. So if you get the Breaking Point 1 Tyrant's Monocle, you might actually see stacks go up quicker. I don't know. I'll have to double check, but again, it's kind of reduced the power of that build. So we're going to see a lot of changes with weapon power builds. And it's all coming down to the attack speed changes as well. I think a lot of that's had an impact here. But Tyrant's Monocle was a really powerful item, and I definitely think they've opened up more breadth in terms of item choices here, guys. So you'll definitely see a lot of changes and choices items. But I will do some testing and see what we think. But let's just run through. Slight buff, kind of. Nerf, definite nerf. Nerf. This is a slight buff, kind of. Very, very small. Buff, small buff, but 2% is actually fairly effective. Big buff. Big buff to Tornado Trigger, and kind of a nerf. You would definitely say a nerf, but you've got a small weapon power increase. But like you said, this is definitely going to open up more builds. I definitely think Tornado Trigger is going to be more and more popular now, especially with this critical strike increase and the big nerf to Breaking Point. It will definitely allow carries like Ringo to function as more of a burst-based carry. And now we're on to the hero changes. So let's look at the hero balance changes here, and this will be a first look for me as well as for you guys. I think this is a good way to do it because it essentially now, we can go over it together and I can give you my first initial thoughts. So have a look at Adagio here. Again, he had a really long attack range and they've nerfed it by 0.2. Now, most of you guys might not actually feel that, but the pros will. If you think about 0.2 as a total percentage of 6.8, it's 3%. So it's very, very, very small. It's a 3% range attack nerf, which in the grand scheme of things isn't a huge big deal. Looking at Gift of Fire, let's have a look here. The burst health down is down by 20 at every rank. And that's actually pretty significant. That's the initial heal that you get from Gift of Fire. Won't stop the damage coming out, but realistically, maybe this attack range nerf will have an effect about how much damage you can deal in lane. But I don't think the 3% attack range is going to make a massive difference. Definitely to the pros it might, but on a day-to-day basis, I don't think this is going to have a huge effect on CP Adagio's potential. But the flat burst heal here, going down by 20 is actually quite big. Definitely makes his role as a captain slightly less efficient in the early game, but I still think you'll see Adagio. I still think he is going to be good. Whether he remains top tier, we will have to see. But definitely think he remains pretty good. Grumpjaw. Wow. Let's have a look at this then. His base scaling armor is down by 4 at the later ranks, so it just scales slightly slower. The shield, base shield, is up. So that basically makes him more tanky in general. I think this kind of aligns his stats to the same sort of line, which I think is good. His health regen is up, his energy is up, his energy recharges up, and his base damage is slightly down, but scales up later in the late game. Damn! I mean, Grumpjaw got a massive buff here. Again, this is going to make his CP a little bit better because the recharge is there. This is going to make his weapon power better in the late game, but 4 damage isn't going to make huge amounts of difference. But 6 damage in the early game might be pretty significant. This is going to have a look. It's remove the bonus armor. It now grants 6% damage reduction per stack. I mean, I'd have to do the maths, right, to think about how much the initial armor and shielding giving, but I definitely don't think at 5 stacks it'll be equivalent to 30% damage reduction. 30% flat damage reduction, I'll have to see if that even applies to true damage, but 30% flat damage reduction is insane. That's really, really good. That's really, really good. I can't stress how good it is. It might be slightly less effective in the early game. You might see you take more damage early on, but obviously 30 armor and shielding was, I can't remember if it was 30 armor and shielding, it might have been 50 actually. Sorry, it was 50 armor and shielding. 50 armor and shielding was really good in the early game. It actually probably gave you more than 30% damage reduction. But in the late game, that became a little bit less effective. Now in the late game, with 30% damage reduction, honestly, it is not hard to maintain Grumpjaw's stacks, to be honest. That's pretty good, I've got to say. That's a big change for him. Let's have a look. It no longer puts Grumpjaw's basic attack on cooldown, and the bonus damage is up to 20 at level 1. That is insane. That makes Weapon Power Grumpjaw really, really good. A lot of people talked about how Weapon Power Grumpjaw was probably good already. I still think how clunky his A ability feels might be a problem, especially with how that is really his only gap closer apart from his ultimate. But it theoretically should make Weapon Power Grumpjaw very durable and a big threat. But that's insane. That's a 15 weapon power bonus damage very early on, which is pretty good. I've got to say Grumpjaw, especially weapon power, looking very good here. But Grumpjaw in general is going to see a lot more play. And actually, especially with this 30% damage reduction and the utility that Grumpjaw brings, you might actually see Captain drop Grumpjaw a little bit more. His CP is kind of similar. Again, it just makes him more durable. But every build for Grumpjaw will be better this update. So Grumpjaw, a big, big buff. Let's have a look. Lyra definitely needed a nerf, so I'm assuming this is a nerf. Early energy is down, so it just means her principal Arcanum isn't going to be as easily to used in lane. Because remember, she could just spam that. Remember, when you use Principal Arcanum, it uses energy. So this is going to make it slightly damaging to use it. I think you might lose like 1 Principal Arcanum from that. So it's just supposed to be less oppressive in lane, but you might lose 1, I think, from total. An Imperial Sigil Cooldown is up on Imperial Sigil, and it scales to it when you overdrive it. So it scales back to normal when you overdrive it. But 2 seconds in the early game actually could be pretty significant. Don't think this changes a huge amount about Lyra. I still think she'll be oppressive in lane. Again, like I said, that might be about one Principal Arcanum that it's going to knock off there. This might affect her early game prowess. Definitely think 2 seconds is a pretty big deal, especially in some of these early game fights. But still think Lyra will be good. Remains to be seen whether she's going to be top tier. Wow, Petal is definitely receiving some changes here. Now, I left her off my jungle tier list because I didn't think she was much of a playmaker, but I'm not going to deny that she was strong. Her attack speed is actually getting buffed here. So her actual attack speed is getting buffed and is scaling. So this makes things like alternating current Petal kind of better, but the attack range is down again by 0.2. That's more like a 5% nerf there instead of a 3% nerf, but again, well, actually it's kind of in between, but it's still like a 3 to 4% nerf here for Petal, so not a huge change. Let's have a look at the Munions. Remove the sunlight attack speed portion of this perk, and leash range down from... So the leash range has been nerfed again, so essentially they'll have to stay closer to Petal. They won't be able to go as far away from Petal again by 0.5, but still 7.5 is quite a long distance. But that's longer than most heroes' basic attack ranges, so realistically still, you know, you don't have to get into basic attack range to get your Munions to do the work. It's a little bit of a nerf, but not a massive piece of nerf. But the attack speed portion is definitely something that needed changing. Let's have a look at the cooldown. Is up from 2. That's not going to be, not to me, not a big deal. Not a huge deal anyway. No longer despawns from being too far away from Petal. This basically means this is interesting because it's down from 45. So this means that you won't see those seeds that are annoying before team fights. They won't be able to sort of do that little knock up, and the damage is going down as well. But to 12 seconds, I mean, you could set it up, but you've got to really be key on knowing where you're going to set these up. If you've only got 12 seconds to think about it, place them, and then force the fight. But they don't despawn, so you can kind of set them up and then bait people in. But at 12 seconds, I don't know how long, or if that will be long enough to make much use of it. We'll have to see. That might need buffing eventually. And Trampoline. Cooldown is up at the late game. So you won't see much of a difference early game, but in the late game, the cooldown's up by 2 seconds. And wow, a flat nerf to both crystal power and weapon power amplification. But it is giving her a slight buff to her attack range. This is definitely, I think, SEMC pushing something like an alternating current Petal, given that her attack speed is scaling and her attack range is going to go up after the trampoline. Or even a weapon power Petal, so alternating current and weapon power Petal. Maybe they're trying to push that specifically. They haven't changed huge amounts in terms of the Munions damage, especially with the overall damage they can put out. But they are definitely pushing alternating current or weapon power Petal with this particular set of changes, so that's really interesting. And let's see, Spitfire. Damn, cooldown's down 2 seconds. That's good in the early game. It stays the same in the late game, though. It definitely means his lane harass is going to get slightly better, but he's still... Scarf is a late game hero, and I think it will remain that he's a sort of a late game hero with 3 seconds. That won't be too much change, but again, Scarf does sometimes have issues with energy. Spitfire going down by 2 seconds will allow him to harass slightly more readily in lane. It's definitely a positive change, and we might see some more Scarf, but let's just run over this. Adagio nerf, but I still think he'll be good. Grumjaw, massive buff. Definitely going to see him played this update. Lyra, little bit of a nerf, but I don't think enough to warrant her not being played. Petal, I can't work it out. It's definitely been a nerf to her current build path, the Frostburn first Petal. But it's kind of pushing the alternating current weapon power Petal here with the attack range increase. You can go up to a 7 attack range at max rank here. I think we'll have to see how this transpires. Don't think Petal will be 100% pick or ban anymore, especially with all of these changes here. But I don't know how powerful this attack speed, alternating current weapon power Petal could be. We'll have to see. do some testing of it in Blitz, guys. And that's it. Yep, that's everything. There's this sort of roadmap here, but you guys can read that. You know what's coming. It's the 5v5 in the talent mode. I'll talk about that in a later video. This has already been too long. Thank you very much for watching. And again, I've got a team fight video coming out tomorrow, hopefully. This was just because I've moved house and wanted to talk about the patch. And if you guys were interested, obviously, it's nice to sort of discuss our opinions. If you guys have opinions on this update, let me know. Lots of exciting things coming for Vainglory, though. That's the really important thing. So many exciting things coming for Vainglory. Really looking forward to this this year. It's going to be amazing. And I'm glad to be sharing it with all of you guys. See you soon.